Well, welcome everybody that's joined up for my session. Really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Hopefully you saw the keynote by Frank, and hopefully you saw some of those things that I certainly believe really cool that we're doing. I think the lab advisor is going to be amazing, and I think the new instruction editor is really going to transform a lot of people's abilities to create far more engaging instructions, especially being able to take advantage more readily of our extensions, which I think sometimes can get a bit lost with lab developers when they're just trying to get the content out the door. So hopefully you found a lot of those things that we're doing really encouraging, beneficial, and all I can say is I think this is going to be this year and into next year, we're just going to be pushing the development envelope stronger than we ever have. So I think it's going to be a really exciting year for the sort of things that you can build and do on our platform. So some of you will know me, Paul Gregory. You might have known me from the lab developer workshops, or because we've talked on Slack, or for various other mechanisms. I might have even been your customer success manager. So you will notice I've got a new job title. I'm now a solutions engineer. We're just re-architecting some of the internal teams and so on. But effectively, I do a very similar role. And I'd like to welcome you officially to the 10 tips in 60 minutes for optimizing your labs. Now, I guess there's a few things that I need to mention here. The first thing is, I don't think there is 10, I think there's more. But when you sort of say 12 tips, it's not quite as catchy. So, so obviously that's just to be aware of. Second of all, I will have an expectation. I see we've got some really well experienced lab developers. So I am going to have some expectations for you. So we'll see how we get on with that. I'll set that expectation in a moment. I guess the other thing that I just want to set as a bit of an expectation, this isn't about, say, for example, how do I optimize a VM? Okay, it's not about that. Okay, we've done those types of subjects quite a lot. We had a big session on things like VM optimization in the lab developer workshop within the last 6-7 months. If you're interested in that, then please reach out to us, and we can certainly get you a recording of that and things along those lines. So so just to make sure, this is more about trying to look at the ways you can optimize your process. So that's the sort of things that we're going to be looking at here, and really building on actually what Frank was talking about in terms of we want the people that use our platform to build the best quality, most engaging labs they possibly can. And I remember when I was a lab developer, when I was a Skillable customer, you was always under the pressure of time to get this product out the door, because you had a date that was set in stone. You was never given the time you maybe needed to actually complete the development of the products and so on. So really being able to optimize those processes, and then optimize the user engagement as well become really important things to do. So as always, I'm happy if you want to put stuff in the chat. I've got a couple of people here. I did think I saw James has joined. David and Kristen are here to obviously help me. There might be some other people that I've missed as well, and they can certainly respond to any messages, and hopefully I will see them in there. So as always, a little bit of an introduction, which I've just been really doing. And we'll just do a bit more frame setting in terms of some specifics. And then, I'm going to look at, optimizations from the lab developer process. How do we improve that lab developer experience? And sometimes, some of these things might be about, how do we improve that from a new lab developer point of view? One of the common pain points I hear is when actually a customer's trying to onboard a new lab developer. How do we get them up and running fast? So, some of the things will sit into there. We'll then actually look at, really some of the things we can do from a user perspective. How do we make it better for the user? If we're trying to optimize the user experience, what we really want to do is we want them to get the maximum bang for their buck from an education point of view. that we want them to be able to actually really, get the best learning experience they can and take away the most amount of learning and knowledge that they possibly can when using one of our labs. So that's really what we're looking at there in terms of some key things that we might be able to do. And actually, one of the things I would really like is your top tips as well. Who are the best people to actually comment on this? And it's yourselves as lab developers. So if you've got any great ideas and you want to chuck them in the chat, then absolutely please do. And what we can do is we can have a little review of those at the end. We can sort of wrap them up as part of a Q&A. So really would be interested, especially if you wanted to wait till I get a couple of slides in, and then you want to throw in a couple of ideas going, oh, Paul's missed this one, because I've missed lots. That's really the long and short of it, because I was limited to 10. I think I put 12 in, and I could have done a lot more than that. So hopefully you'll have a few that you can add into the system. So what are we, why are we really looking at this? So, the first thing is actually how can we get, product to market faster? If we really think about, if you're building a learning experience for somebody, okay, actually they need that the day you start writing it, if not the day before, because obviously the technology or the product or whatever it is there. So effectively someone needs to learn about it. So in reality, you're always behind the curve when you're developing the course, because the technology is there. Well, nearly always. Very rarely are we writing training materials for something that's not been released. But also one of the problems, I think we often have within an organisation when we're writing labs is often we've got more than one lab developer. How do we get consistency? In some ways, when I used to work, we'd have all these people writing courses, and then effectively they'd all go into the same sort of team, and they would edit and sort of standardise and format. Well, actually, when you're writing labs on the Skillable platform, chances are no one's actually then really sanitizing the formatting and the presentation. You might have someone who goes with a bit of QA to make sure you've actually got instructions that make sense. But actually what we want is we want to take that high quality as an organization that you can build, and we want to make that consistent regardless of who's developing the content and so on. And we want to make sure when we're actually building labs, okay, the user is not fighting with the platform. If we think about the broad spectrum of people that might take a training course, from people that are very IT literate and therefore the platform presents no barriers, to people where even something moving on a menu can actually cause them a challenge. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to try and make sure that we don't have any challenges with the user using the platform. We want them to learn. We don't want them to have to fight the platform. So that's really sort of one of the things that's quite important. And if we do that, then that allows us to engage the user. There's nothing worse than a user going, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that, and then go, I just can't be bothered. The labs that are being provided for me are not good. So therefore, I'm going to step away from them. Okay. And one of the things we often have to remember, and I remember this as, again, from my days as a customer, ultimately, if you're selling courses externally rather than building internal training, okay, effectively the lab delivery platform is part of your identity as that customer. It's part of your brand. In reality, I couldn't stand, when I used to teach courses, I couldn't stand up and really turn around and say, well, don't blame us. It's company X or company Y's product. Because ultimately, from a customer paying money to me, they were saying, well, if the product's not good enough, then why are you selling it to us? And so actually, you have to own it. Okay, so that becomes really important, and we want to make sure that we make it look as part of an integrated solution. So these are all things that we might want to do. So when we think about lab developer optimizations, okay, so things about making your process a little bit easier, a little bit more consistent, a little bit more cookie cutters, say. So the fact that actually I want to start to build a new lab, there are, ways that I can expedite that process. Okay, and I'm possibly going to be a little bit controversial to start with. Okay, because I know from some of the people we've got here, incredibly experienced lab developers, and often what they would do is they would actually go, right, I need to create a new lab, so I'm going to hit the create lab profile and straight away go over to the create custom, okay, and start to fill in the form. Okay, and actually one of the things that we would really like to try and encourage people to do is utilize the template gallery. Okay, and really what I'm going to do here is sort of address a couple of misnomers about the template gallery. Okay, because people often look at the list of templates that we provide and go, well, there's nothing in there that we can really take advantage of, and then effectively turn their back on it and just go straight for that create custom link in the top right hand corner. Okay, so I guess from the template gallery point of view, the two things that I want to emphasize really is, first and foremost, if there is nothing in there that's right for you, build your own. Okay, in reality, building a template to go into the template gallery is an act of ticking one box once you've built the lab profile. So on the advanced page, in the list of tick boxes that you've got on that advanced page, there's just a tick box that says publish this to the template gallery. Okay, and that's all you need to do to take an existing lab profile and turn it into a template. Okay, so at that point, as you can see on the slide, if someone comes along and actually picks the my organization, okay, that would just show them the templates that actually exist on there. Okay, so this is actually an example from one of our customers. I've just copied out or blanked out all the important pieces of sort of secret information, if you like. But the key thing is this is a really good example. And actually, one of the things that I'd like to highlight is actually you don't necessarily have to have things like virtual machines inside your template gallery. This particular customer, most of the things that are in their templates are actually settings inside the lab profile that they don't want to give a lab developer manual steps to say, oh, make sure you go and add this introduction URL, make sure you add this theme, make sure you add this exit URL, make sure you set the save options this way, make sure you, basically they've just removed all of those parts that need to be done as part of a lab profile. So even if you don't necessarily have virtual machines because your needs, your choices, your varieties are so diverse, okay, you can still get the starting point. And actually, one of the things which I think is really great with this particular set of examples, and actually some of the new instruction editing maybe removes the need for this a little bit, is they have an amazing instruction template. So all of those have an instruction template set aside. And not only has it got the correct color schemes, the logos, it's also got all the pieces they need for style guides. It's actually got the way they like their manuals to be presented and written. Okay, so almost from an SME's point of view of writing the lab instructions, I effectively just have to fill the blanks in. I just got to go and do that. Okay. So this is a really great feature, and often I think underused by our customers. Now, there is a possibility, and James has put a great message into the chat. Thank you, James. That if you sit there and go, well, I've never seen that published to the template gallery, or I've never seen the template gallery when I press the create lab profile. Okay, please get in touch. There are permissions that we can enable for you. It's not a cost. I know someone was asking about, things like the lab advisor going to be like a cost add-on or something along those in the session earlier on. And again, this is the same, absolutely completely free. So one of the things that's really worth just pointing out as well, okay, is if you look at our roadmap, okay, so obviously Frank mentioned the roadmap, you will see, things like template gallery. are actually pieces of technology which are also going to be improved and enhanced over the coming months and so on. So this is a piece of technology, we're going to really expand capability. So for example, if you are sitting there going, well, I like the template gallery, but we don't use it because now's a great time to put something into the feedback site. Okay, because it's actually one of those pieces of technology that's coming up for review and refresh. So you get the chance to actually get some capability added that you might want, for example. The second thing, which I find a lot of people waste a lot of time with, is managing storage. Yeah, often when I speak to customers, there's conversations around how should we organize our storage? How do I manage our storage? Now, I think one of the great things from Skillable's point of view, and again, this was a great thing from when I was a customer, is we don't charge for storage. So in some ways, you can be really lazy, you can be a bit slapdash, and actually it doesn't matter, because if I'm running out of storage, I just place a support call, I contact my account exec and say, can I have some more, please? And we just sort of effectively up the quota. But I also understand, and if you're a little bit like me, I'm certainly one of those people that if I actually think I don't need that anymore, I put that in the bin really fast. I like to sort of get rid of what I regard as being pointless. And I am that person that also then realizes the week after I've done that, I really do need that. Okay. So if you are one of those people that thinks, well, actually, I would like to keep on top of my storage, I would like to have an understanding. We do actually have a best practice guide that we keep secret about how you might organize storage. And I appreciate that what I'm about to present to you, a lot of you are then going to go, well, yeah, well, we've been building labs for 4 years, so our storage is a mess and it doesn't look like that at all. But, it's never too late to start. That's really all I can say going forwards. So we do actually have some sort of best practices from the point of view of storage. Okay, and we would generally recommend, certainly a structure that revolves around things like lab series, lab profile, virtual machine name would be examples of where you're creating virtual machines and the virtual disks for a specific lab profile. If you are going to share VMs between lab profiles, then you might just pull that back one layer and actually store the virtual machine virtual disks in the folder above and so on. So in reality, again, one of the things we generally let customers do is we let them be very specific about or use their own processes and procedures about how they might want to do this, but just some guidelines on how you might want to try and organize storage going forwards. Of course, you can implement something very, very similar for VMware as well. Obviously, just really the file extensions on the file names would be slightly different. Now, another thing that we often recommend is a couple of things really from the point of view of actually, so I should do on that page yet, actually optimizing the management of virtual machines. Okay. One of the things we do try to really convince people to do, especially for Windows-based machines, but this is becoming more and more applicable to Linux, especially if they've got a graphical user interface, is try to minimize the changes that you make to operating system disks. So one of the things that becomes really, really important when we talk about building virtual machines is try to use a second disk in your virtual machines for storing lab file data, applications that people might install, and all those sorts of things. Okay, the reason for that is, if I just take Windows as a primary example, okay, I'm sure there's some of you as a lab developer out there have actually done things like spin up a lab. Well, I've got to make some changes to my Windows VM. Okay, you've done the changes, you've save the changes, and then you've gone and done something like, oh, I forgot to rearm it. Okay, right, spin it back up, rearm, create a save disk, and you end up with this sort of big, massive chain of disks and things. And obviously, we want to try and minimize that. And so one of the things, I would always recommend is that as a lab developer, you do build a second data or a second disk, which you basically can use for storing all of that data that's maybe subject to change, all of that data that is effectively not part of the operating system. Because the great thing about that, if you think about our lab profile save environment, so you've got to make some changes to a virtual machine, you save it. One of the questions we ask you is not only which virtual machine do you want to save, and of course you can select one or more than one depending what's in the lab profile, but we also ask you what disks would you like to save. So you don't have to save all the disks for a particular virtual machine. So if you have gone and built this really nice sort of Windows operating system, you've rearmed it, it's all perfect, it's got all your company branding and colors or whatever you wanted to do in there, okay, then any of that data that might change from course to course, you can just have a different data disk. And anytime you need to update, anytime you need to modify that content, you can just go in and change the data disk and just save the data disk. You don't need to worry about rearming the operating system or anything along those lines and not touching the operating system disk at all. And that can become quite important from a Windows optimization point of view, because hopefully, as we all know, as you start to increase the number of differencing disks, that can have an impact on machine performance, especially when you're getting to the 20, 30 sort of snapshots that you've taken. Okay. And if you're actually avoiding all of that, first of all, you're not going to get that big long chain. Second of all, it's going to maintain the performance, because actually with a Windows machine, one of the things people don't really realize, you think, well, if I boot a Windows machine and I don't do anything with it, it's not doing anything, but it's always messing about with things like the page file and organizing stuff. So because of all these background processes, there's always a lot of activity going on. Yeah, that can really improve the experience. So just obviously sort of highlighting the little VM profile picture at the top there, 2 disks, and then of course you see those actually inside the VM. So you can see inside the VM, I've got my drive C and my drive D on the left there. And then when you come to the save, you've got the save screen snippet there. You can see that you can just save the disk. So just a question there about, speaking of disk disks, is there a way to collapse the chain and remove the older snapshots? There absolutely is, Andrew. So today you place a support call. Okay, you place a support call, and what will actually happen is someone in our team, normally I think the actual SLA for this is technically 5 days, but normally it happens much quicker than that. Someone in our team will effectively build a new virtual machine profile for you, which will have the collapsed disk. So we won't touch your original. Okay, so there's no impact on production, nothing along those lines. We will build a new virtual machine profile, which will have the new collapsed disk on it. The idea then is you can spin that up, you can check to make sure that's all working, it hasn't got corrupted because of the being collapsed down, and then you can move the disk over onto your live virtual machine as and when you want to. So we can do that. Now, interestingly, you mentioned that, Andrew, that is the most requested feature in the feedback site. I think when I looked at it last week, it's been upvoted over 20 times for people. And it is something that actually our product team, and as James has just put in there, we are looking to make this a self-service feature this year. Okay, so but if you wanted to go and add some comments and things, really great opportunity to go and do that and get yourself into the feedback site. Okay, cool. In terms of chargeable, I don't believe it's chargeable, Anil. I've never known a customer be invoiced for it. You would need to confirm with your account exec, but because it's something that's not self-service, I don't believe we charge for it. I do believe we might start charging for it when it becomes a self-service feature. But I think today there's no charge. The next thing I'd like to think about is about, as a lab developer, bringing your corporate identity. Okay, make the labs look like your organization, your color schemes, your logos, graphics, potentially, those sorts of things. Okay, that would be something that I would recommend. Now, I'm not necessarily saying the example on the right hand side is something I would necessarily go for, but what we see a lot is everybody just runs with the default layout. Okay, so the example that we have on the left hand side. Okay, but actually, if you was to look at the content your organization produces, your company would have a color scheme. Your company would maybe have a particular font you might want to use, which you can get as a web font and so on. So ultimately you can use themes to ensure that actually the environment looks like your organizations. So themes, again, certainly from my point of view, are a really underutilized piece of technology, and it's really going to give most organizations that ability to start to sort of again impose that organization's look and feel, and really start to sort of say, actually, this looks like our company. It all looks like a unified solution and branding. Okay, so absolutely, themes become, from my point of view, a very powerful feature for you to being able to bring that corporate identity across. Okay. Yeah, obviously there's kind of conversations, if you've not seen it in the chat, about number of like snapshots or differencing disks or checkpoints, whatever term you'd like to use. It's always a bit variable in terms of where that number should be. So there's always normally a range, because a lot of things that depend is how big is each one. So you could actually find a machine that's got 15 diff disks, performance degrades really badly because 10 of them are 5, 6, 7 gigabytes each. And then you could end up in a situation where you got 40 diff disks and it runs okay because they're all just a few hundred meg. So it's always a bit guesswork, but yeah, absolutely, 20 to 30 is a great range to sort of be looking at. And one of the things I've often advised customers, Andrew, that run into this quite a lot, is a great time to actually do the merging is actually that point that you're going to push a lab profile to production. Maybe you've done all your development and get the disks collapsed before you actually push it to production. But yeah, this is going to be something great for Lab Advisor as well. Okay, and we're going to basically be able to alert that. And I don't think Frank mentioned this morning. Obviously, I wouldn't say it would necessarily be for this particular activity, but one of I think the great things that's going to come with Lab Advisor is it will actually have the ability to remediate for you as well in some circumstances. So hopefully themes, if you've not looked at themes, we can certainly give some guidance. We have some information in our documentation on themes. It really depends on what your skills are like around maybe a bit of CSS, or potentially, depending what you want to do, maybe even a little bit of JavaScript, for example. But themes can be a really great way to make the solution look like it's your organization's, and it just enhances that branding all the way across the platform. So hopefully seeing there's some things that we can do to actually make the lab developer experience more efficient, using the template gallery, get those labs up and running faster. Especially if you start to use the template gallery to do things like have a template of what your instructions need to look like, and you sort of fill in the blanks and so on. Start to actually, change the way maybe you build things like virtual machines so you can actually manage them more efficiently when you need to make changes to them and so on. So if we get the lab looking right in terms of the machine's good, we've actually got the correct branding, the correct look and feel, okay, how can we make the user experience a little bit more engaging. Okay, and I guess the first thing I would say, which really sort of highlights the first two bullet points, I've worked in scenarios. I remember, so I used to teach a lot of Microsoft official courses. Okay, and sometimes you would actually see, and this doesn't matter whether it was the printed paper book or whether it was, for an authorized lab hoster like Skillable, sometimes you'd find this instruction page was enormous, so you're scrolling up and down, and you would often find, the learners would get lost where they are, they just can't track what they're doing in the lab against what the instructions. So how do we make effectively the instructions not the problem? If you've got a learner that's scrolling up and down in the instructions trying to find where they are and what they've got to do next, effectively it's becoming a barrier to learning. Okay, so how do we optimize the user engagement by, first of all, not making the platform a barrier? So the first thing that could be really easy is make it easy for them to navigate. So things like a contents page. I can think of, a couple of customers that actually produce content on our platform, and they actually have something that's like a 3 or 4 day course, and they just have the instructions in one big page. Okay, so when actually someone sort of saves the lab at the end of the first day and comes back in, they can take them ages to actually find where they are in the instructions. And when they come in for day 3, it's even worse, let me tell you. So just a simple contents page at the beginning of the instructions can be really, really powerful. Okay, so this ability to maybe have some high level categories, and then each section has its own sort of sets of contents pages. So just some, some really simple examples here of what that might look like. Okay. I would also suggest keep each instruction page short. Okay. Try to keep each instruction page short. So let's have a yeah, this one. Okay. So one of the things I would recommend, okay, you absolutely can, Andrew. Yeah, you can do that. It's actually what we call an internal link. So I'm going to be very controversial here. Okay. Next time you're editing instructions, okay, press the little question mark at the top on the instruction bar. Okay, and you get a page of tooltips. Okay, and have a look at internal links. Okay, and that's what you want to do. So yeah, keep each page short. Okay, in reality, what I would try and suggest to people is try to avoid users having to scroll down the page. Okay, because really what you want them to do is carry out those instructions, press next, carry out those instructions, press next. Some of you might have seen the way some of our challenge labs look like. This is actually from a challenge snippet, and we try to keep those pages really short. Okay, we want to minimize that scrolling up and down. It stops users getting lost. Again, if you're working in something like a website, a web page, or a virtual machine, this need to keep clicking in different windows. How many times have you seen scenarios, for example, where users have got to type something into a virtual machine, and it turns out because they've clicked on the instruction window, when they start typing, it doesn't type in the virtual machine. Okay, and then they go, oh, got to click in the virtual machine. It's just a user barrier. Okay, so if the instructions actually don't need to be scrolled up and down, then actually that can just take that one little activity or little issue out of it. So try and keep the pages quite short. That really does make a big difference to the user. Okay, again, one of the things I would suggest from a user engagement point of view is try avoid getting the user to go and use things like the resources tab. Again, the amount of times I've seen people create instructions and they want the user to switch to a different virtual machine. So go and switch to, Win-02. And what the instructions actually say is click on the resources link at the top and then click on Win-02. Yeah. So you've taken the user away from the instructions. And then they go back to the instructions because they've forgotten the virtual machine name they've got to click on. And then they go back to them, and it just becomes a bit disconnected. Just use the AppLab tokens. Okay, so put the AppLab token in that lets them just click on the machine name if they need to in the instructions, and it will switch them across. And then have the instructions for, pressing Control-Alt-Delete, and use the AppLab token for the Control-Alt-Delete button, and again the username and password if required. And hopefully one of the things that you all spotted in Frank's presentation today was the new editing environment that we're building. So these all of a sudden can start to become those little snippets so that you can easily put them in, and then you get consistent language, not just when you're doing it, but also those snippets can become consistent across your organization, your lab developers. So you get that consistent experience. So one of the things that's often sometimes an interesting conversation, is, do you use terms like login or sign in? Okay. Now, as an organization, do you have a specific where you sort of lean towards, or is it a case of where you log into Linux, but you sign into Windows? Because the Linux login box says login, but the Windows one says sign in. So again, I think those features inside the new editor are going to be really, really good to get that consistency and take it to another level. But AppLab tokens really allow you to put that dynamic capability in the instructions to affect the user environment and allow the user to focus more on the tasks at hand. And again, I think that's the other thing that I would always say when thinking about the user experience. Okay. Anything you put in the instructions, think about what is the learning objective, okay? And that's quite important. Again, I spent a lot of time writing instructions, and I've worked with other people, and I've seen them, for example, have like big pieces of PowerShell or big like lines of Bash script, okay? And you sit there, and when the user tries to do it, they try to type it in, and it goes wrong, and then often the instructor's got to come along and try to debug. Well, is the learning objective, can you type in that 60 characters, or is the learning objective actually the output of that and understanding the output? So sometimes that's one of the things to think about. Don't make it hard that people got to type large command lines in if that's not the learning objective. Okay. Of course, if you're trying to teach them PowerShell or you're trying to teach them Bash scripting, then of course they do need to type it in. That's the objective. And the other thing that also becomes really important is actually using some sort of knowledge checks, whether they're automated, whether they're actually driven by the user actually pressing the button. I don't know how many of you, and I think this is a really amazing feature of our platform, but I know so many people don't use it. When you look at automated activities, I've used the option that says show us task list. I think that's one of our best kept secrets, if I'm really honest about it, from an automated activity point of view, because that automated activity gives you this really nice layout. So you've got actually a few things that you're going to go get the user to check against. Okay, and they get this nice little list, and they get the green ticks if they get it right, and they get the red X's against each of them. For that sort of check to see if they've actually gone and done the work correctly. And I think from a user engagement point of view, these sorts of little check your works that we use these in. Anyone's got access to our challenge labs. This is the way we do our advanced challenge labs for the knowledge check. And I think these, are really powerful in terms of being able to do that and do that user engagement, because that's really encouraging the user, I think, and therefore will actually optimize their learning, which is really what we wanted to do. We really want them to do that. So carrying on, other things from the user point of view, okay? Try not. So on the automated activities, Andrew, it's actually in a list. I'll see if I can dig up a lab profile for you while I'm talking and show it at the end. But it's one of the tick boxes for an automated activity. Okay. Oh, thank you, David. Perfect. avoid users having to wait, okay? Generally, I have a rule of thumb when I write content, okay? If a user has to wait for more than 3 minutes when they're doing something in a lab, can I bake that in? Can I make that part of the lab? Okay. Do they really need to sit there and wait? Now, there are some scenarios where the answer to that is yes. Let's take a really simple example. Okay. You was coming on a course where you're going to learn to install Windows or learn to install Linux and maybe do basic configuration. Okay. Well, at that point, the install sort of takes a while. So one of the things you could consider is I want them to go through the install process. Okay, that might be a decision that you choose. Okay, you could, of course, spin that a different way. And, you could ultimately have a situation where you've got a virtual machine where they start the installation. Okay, and then actually you've got a virtual machine which is then saved in that state where the installation is just about to finish off. So therefore, they don't have to sit there for the 10 minutes or 15 minutes for that activity. So I appreciate there are scenarios where you might want them to go through that process, but I would say in most scenarios, in terms of engaging the user, try to avoid activities unless they're critical to the learning, where they've got to sit there twiddling their thumbs. Because ultimately, what happens if they're waiting for something? They pick up the phone, they go and do something else, and all of a sudden they forget what they're learning about. They get distracted, and it diminishes the learning potential. Okay. One of the things I always recommend, again, to help users is if you're actually building VM based, try to make them look different. Okay. So here, just obviously, I've got this one sort of screenshot of the one computer, but you can see from the little thumbnails on the right, they've all got different color desktops. Okay. They've all got big text across the top of the bitmap to identify the machine name. Again, as an instructor, especially, again, if I go back to teaching mock courses, so Microsoft official curriculum when I was a Microsoft instructor, because all the VMs were Microsoft Blue, if I had been English, if I had £1 for every time someone tried to carry out an instruction in the wrong virtual machine, as much as I love Skillable, I wouldn't be here working today. I would be sitting on a sunny beach somewhere. Okay, so try to actually make them look really different. Okay, again, you might do things around corporate color scheme, those sort of things as part of it, but effectively make it easy for the users to realize where they need to be. And of course, you can even add little icon colors and stuff inside the instructions if you wanted to. I've certainly done that with networking courses. To give you an example of something that I wrote at my previous company, before we did a networking section, there was a graphic at the top of the instructions which represented what the network looked like. Okay, and each of the little computers that were on the network diagram, those pictures were colored based on the screen color. So effectively, it became really easy to correlate in the instructions what they were doing in relation to which machines and so on. So you just make it easy for people to do those connections. Okay, really, really easy. And the other thing, we would always say is, as a minimum, use guided instructions rather than step by step. Okay. Now, I appreciate, obviously, organizations have their own instructional design philosophies. And, as an organization, you have to stick to those philosophies. Okay. But what I've generally always seen is if you give people a lab activity, and that lab activity has a set of steps, okay, what you've effectively done, because step 1 says, number 1, do this, and the last step, whatever number it is, says do this, okay, because the steps are numbered, it becomes a race, okay, the race to complete the lab. So often you find that people don't actually really engage with the learning. I'm sure there's going to be some of you on here that have taught courses, and actually you've had feedback from the learners that said, I completed that, but I don't know what I did. Okay, and that's because it's all about how fast can I complete this activity. So we would always recommend try to take a more guided approach to activities. Okay, so don't make the instructions step by step, or not step by step straight away. You know, set scenario, give some context. This is what we'd like you to do. This is the information you need to complete this task. This might be a great place for you to start. You know, use this tool, you know, type this search criteria in. But of course, what, you know, especially in this world where we're doing more and more self-paced learning, you know, we also have to be, well, what if people struggle with that? What if people can't get started that way? So, great then, actually, in this example, where you've got the expand this hint for guidance on creating a new application security group. So that might contain the step-by-step instructions, okay, or certainly a more detailed set of instructions. Okay, so you might get users that will actually come along, and all they'll do is they'll just click on the light bulbs and expand it and follow those instructions. Okay, but if you didn't put them there, those are the ones which are just going to turn around and say, I can't do the lab, it's too complex for me, or whatever it might be. But those that want to learn and those that want to engage, they will actually use this as a more exploring based model. And you know, one of the other techniques that we use these more in our advanced challenge labs, but you might want to consider for optimizing that user experience, is not, you know, for more advanced events, not put the instructions in, not the step-by-steps, but refer them to documentation. So on our advanced, okay, you would actually send them off to the, you know, vendor documentation for the application. Okay. So those sort of things. So in terms of, Anil, where can you find what? Sorry, the expandable sections. Okay, that's actually done by, yes. So you will find it under the question mark icon. So we have a number of tokens that you can use, like alert and help and knowledge. Okay, and they all put a little icon on, and then you can have like a little expanding box and so on. So you know, and if you need any help, obviously, if you've got a CSM, give them a shout. They'll run you through it. If not, place a support call, and the support team have got some examples they could send out to you if you actually needed. Okay. So, or if you come on one of the lab developer workshops where we've got a bit more time, and Neil, just give me a nudge. And what we can do is I can do a little side demo for you on one of the lab developer workshops. Okay. So next one's end of June. Okay, Azure, if anyone's interested. Bit of advertising there. Sorry about that. I digress. Okay, cool. So looking at the time. Okay, so the last thing that I would actually say to somebody as a lab developer, okay, if you sit there and go, yeah, that's good enough, that's about right, that's all, that's okay. Actually, your users' learning will be impacted negatively. Okay, effectively, good enough will mean you will have a percentage of people that will actually turn around and go, I don't get on with this. Okay, so you know, I appreciate we all have the pressure of time. Okay, and sometimes we run out of time and we have to get the product out the door, and you know, that's a fact of commercial life and the world we live in. But ultimately, you know, if you get to that, it's good enough, you will find some people will struggle with it. You know, it might be you know, a very small set, but I think ultimately that always means that you know you can make it better. And I think that's the key thing. And so actually, how do I improve this? How do I make it better? Okay, so I didn't see any suggestions coming in. I was looking to see if there was. I don't know if anyone's got any ideas in terms of little optimizations they might use, but hopefully there's been lots of little tips and tricks there. I think actually from some of the chat that's been going on, there's a few things that you've maybe picked up that maybe you can improve your instructions, and optimize some of your environment. Okay. So hopefully that's been sort of really beneficial. I don't know if anybody's got any questions they'd like to ask. If you want to throw them in the chat, you're more than welcome to. If you've got a question, you can unmute your microphone if there's anything you'd like to add. Just hang on a minute. There's either some typing going on.
Hey Paul, this is Anil.
Hello.
Is there any specific reason that the instructions have the autosave feature enabled automatically? What was the thought process behind it?
Oh, that's sort of before my time, really. I imagine it was just purely so that people don't lose stuff. I don't know if James might have a comment on why it was enabled automatically for autosave, but I have to say that was a little bit before my time in terms of that design decision. I expect it was just a safe choice, really.
Yeah, we had seen that a lot of people actually were losing their changes, expecting it to autosave, and it obviously wasn't enabled by default. So we actually, at one point, it was not on by default, and we made that change out of a lot of people losing their changes, thinking it was saving. So it's one of those things where there's always going to be people on both sides of the fence, right? People who want it to autosave, people who don't want it to autosave. So we erred on the side of caution of, hey, we'd rather you, keep your changes and you can go back in there and delete things if you need to, as opposed to, losing all the hard work you put in there. Especially if, you had to walk away real quick, something came up at work, or, somebody got hit by a bus outside your house if you're working from home, whatever. You got to walk away real quick. It's saved and it's not going to go anywhere on you. It should be able to be turned off right in the settings there, though, if you don't enjoy it.
Yeah, the little cog. The other thing I would also say, Neil, because a lot of people are actually unaware of this, is when you're in the instruction editor, if you've sort of made a change, or let's say, for example, you deleted a load of content and you then all of a sudden done, I've done that by mistake, and then it's auto saved and you go, I've lost all that stuff. Control Z works. So you can do Control Z to undo changes even after an auto save. So I don't know if you're aware of that. So that can be a really useful tip, because I think a lot of people are unaware Control Z works for undoing.
Yeah, I do use Control Z to, if mistakenly I've made some deletion or, made some updation.
Yeah, I use it every day.
Yeah, and I will say the autosave kind of sticks with your account. So if you disable it once, if you go and edit, 15 different labs, autosave will be off every single time. So if, whichever way you like it, it's totally up to you, and it'll stay that way until you re-enable it or re-disable it.
Cool. Awesome. So hopefully I'd just like to have a little recap, so I'll be conscious of the time. Okay. So hopefully some of the tips that certainly were shared today allow you to, get labs built faster. Get that, reduce time to market, get that actually out the door a bit quicker, and hopefully start to really be able to build, high quality labs, especially when there's different lab developers involved and so on. That can be sort of really beneficial. Get that consistent experience using the templates and so on. And hopefully a few things we've seen to maybe try and improve, simplify the user experience, and get that user more engaged, get them paying less attention to the environment and more on what you actually want them to learn and so on. And, and I would always suggest, it was always one of the things where I used to work, where I couldn't convince them to really drive our brand through the products at the company that I was at before, and really wish they did. And I would, recommend that to every customer. Get your color schemes in there, get your logos in there, get your brand in there, and actually make it look like it's part of your organization, part of your unified solution. Because I think that can, really improve the perception, and, just, add that credibility. Okay, so hopefully, I had a few questions there and that. So hopefully it's been a, really great session, and appreciate also your feedback there, Monica, in terms of actually, you collapsing your discs. Really a big thing that a lot of people do. So it's really valuable. So we're just coming up about 4 minutes to go. If anyone's got any questions, they're more than welcome to sort of, chuck them into the chat or unmute your microphone in a moment. But hopefully it's been a useful hour. There's been some great stuff going on in the chat, and I really appreciate everybody that's added content into the chat and so on. Thank you very much. Obviously, there were more sessions coming up in about 15 minutes time, just over 15 minutes. So again, if you're booked on a session, awesome. If you're not booked on a session, you can just go to skillinfo or skill.info/launchq2, and all the links for the afternoon sessions are actually there. So you can go and pick what you want. I'm pretty sure that Kristen in the background there working away hard is going to sending out the evaluation. So watch out in your email for the evaluations. We'd really appreciate your feedback, because that completely drives what we do. We are completely driven by our customers' desires and needs. And of course, as always, we always like you to engage with us via social media. And there's been a few things where I've said about, you can contact us about this. Obviously, contact support, use Slack. To be honest, any of our contact mechanisms, we will get someone to get back to you. So even if you basically have got no other idea how to contact us, you can even email us at events@skillable.com, and Kristen and Jenny and so on will make sure that your question gets to the right person. We will always be there to help you. So once again, really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for attending this session, and I hope it's been valuable. So if anyone wants to stay on for a couple of minutes and ask a question, you're more than welcome to. Otherwise, grab yourself a little break. Hopefully see you on one of the sessions starting in just over 15 minutes. Thank you very much, everybody.